Let me make myself clear. What happens in Israel does not stay in Israel. And if you think our borders are secure, you've got something else coming. Iran might be 8,000 miles away, but its destructive path is just around the corner. Islam is growing at a rapid rate, and we are undoubtedly in the last days. God told us to expect these things, and as Christians, we know the end game. God wins, but the battle is about to get ugly. Christ could come at any moment, and what awaits us is unbelievable. I want you guys to know something, okay? This is critical. This is very, very important. You need to know that what we are seeing with Islam is not just something that is localized to a region 8,000 miles away, okay? A lot of people tend to think Israel doesn't affect me because it's thousands of miles away. A lot of people think Egypt doesn't affect me because it's thousands of miles away. They say that all over the Middle Eastern world, no matter what happens there, we are not going to be affected. And the reason why is because we are separated by distance. But there's a huge problem with that statement. And that is the fact that the current administration, let's just call them regime, that is controlling office in the United States of America has already opened the Pandora's box for people coming across the border and in essence, destroying in the name of Allah and jihad, the lives of American citizens. There are tons of sleepers that are in this country, and they are ready to do what they are doing, as they would say in Islam, bi'isma Allah, in the name of Allah. By the way, don't let anybody deceive you. Allah is not a general term for God. It is not a title. Allah is a name that is connotative of a very specific individual. I think that's very important to point out. The level of brainwashing that is going on is significant in that the devil is the father of lies, and he continues to take these lies and communicate them in ways that cause people to personalize them to the point that they go to radical extremes to defend a cause that they have no understanding of. And I think that this is very important. As a matter of fact, I would like to start with a few videos for you to see that will help better demonstrate the point that I am bringing up. You need to understand that the reason why we continue to contend for these issues centers around the fact that so many people do not understand what is going on across the globe and have no real understanding of the issues that center the many problems that we continue to face. Now, this is interesting because this is the Emiratis Minister of Foreign Affairs who makes a comment concerning the problem of what's happening in Europe. By the way, we should start with this, because if we start with this, then we'll better understand the fact that when we speak about Islamic jihad, when we speak about what the Quran says concerning what Allah desires for those that are in Islam, when we speak about Muslims, when we talk about the idea and the world of Islam, you have to understand that what it entails is the destruction of anybody who is not willing to submit to the words of Allah. This is a very, very important issue. And many of the people who are fundamentalists, anybody in essence who is a fundamentalist of Islam, will take it to the extreme. We have to remember this. There's a context for this. So listen to what the Emiratis Minister of Foreign Affairs says, and it is profoundly true.
Oh, أنت تتحمل مسؤوليتها. And
by the way, he starts speaking in Arabic and immediately decides he's going to go into speaking English here. Okay, so that's very important. I want you guys to see this. It's critical. Okay, take a listen.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
When he speaks of the lack of decision-making, he is talking about the absence of the will to eliminate the problem of the type of insanity that we see Islam allowing and making way for people to follow. And the hypocrisy that follows that world is extreme. Absolutely extreme, especially when people make representations about matters that they absolutely do not understand. And yet Israel continues to be targeted on a regular basis without any foundation for why they do what they do. This is an interesting speech that I'll play a portion of. I think it's worthwhile. This is Hillel Noor. He's speaking to the United Nations. I believe this is a United Nations address. And what he says here is very interesting. He is part of an organization called UN Watch. And what he says here is staggeringly critical for us to be able to understand.
Thank you, Mr. President. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs, whatever challenges they face, enjoy full rights to vote and to be elected in the Knesset. They work as doctors and lawyers. They serve on the Supreme Court. Now, I'd like to ask the members of that commissioned that report, the Arab states from which we just heard, Egypt, Iraq, and the others, how many Jews live in your countries? How many Jews lived in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco? Once upon a time, the Middle East was full of Jews. Algeria had 140,000 Jews. Algeria, where are your Jews? Egypt used to have 75,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Syria, you had tens of thousands of Jews. Where are your Jews? Iraq, you had over 135,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Mr. President, where is the real apartheid? Why is there a UN commission on the Middle East that does not include Israel? From the 1960s and the 70s, they refused to include Israel. Where is the apartheid, Mr. President? Mr. President, why are we meeting today on an agenda item singling out only one state, the Jewish state, for targeting? Where is the apartheid, Mr. President?
Notice the silence in the room. Notice the lack of response. This is not a video effect, folks. There is silence in the room here. The fact that we continue to see and observe an environment where Jews continue to be targeted in ways that are substantial. You know, it's funny how they actually say that Palestinians are being murdered by Jews in a genocidal fashion. Yet, when Israel took back possession of the land that was given to them by God in 1948, in 67, and in 73, understand at the very beginning of this, the absolutely liberal, insane, crazy number is that there were about 500,000 Arabs that were living in that region. 500,000. In Gaza alone, there are 2.1 million to 3 million Jews. So when you say that there is something apartheid-related or genocidal happening in Israel, if it is genocidal, then why is it that there is a growing population of Arabs? Here's another question. How is it that the number of Jews is dropping in Arab countries all over the world? I understand that many of them are immigrating back to Israel because it's the only land that they feel safe in. And even then, there are problems associated with the land in that context. How about this? Here's another big one. How about we take it a step further, because this is important. If the Arabs in Israel are increasing in population, more millionaire Arabs are being made in Israel than any other country outside of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. What's happening? Is there some kind of a conflicting message that's going on? This is ugly. And the lies continue to be communicated in ways that are so derogatory that you have to be completely ignorant of history and unaware of what's really happening in order to believe these lies. But that's what's going on. Did you know that the president of the largest bank in Israel is an Arab, considered to be a Palestinian? Why is it that Israel is the only country that's willing to take in Palestinians, where all 22 Arab countries don't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole. Explain that to me. Explain how that works. Yet we're so quick to throw out terms like genocide. We're so quick to throw out terms that are designed to grab the heartstrings of a person who might hear those words, but it's very obvious that so few people are aware of the facts. This is something that people do not understand. And the Islamic mindset and the Islamic philosophy that is being force-fed to them through Sharia law, based on many contradicting principles in the Quran, continue to communicate the lies that people are believing hook, line, and sinker. This is crazy if you think about it. How about the fact that besides Jews all over the world, one of the greatest persecuted groups are Christians? And amongst Christians who are being persecuted, why don't we talk about Armenia for a second? Why don't we talk about Armenians who are suffering even at the hands of those in Azerbaijan? No one really wants to talk about the hundreds of thousands, potentially hitting 1 million Armenians that have been brutally murdered. You want to talk about real genocide? When you look at what's going on with Azerbaijan, which, by the way, interestingly enough, is a Shiite Muslim country, and not only a Shiite Muslim country, but one that happens to be close to Israel for some uniquely and distinct economically strategic reasons. That's a very complicated relationship, by the way. But why in the world do we not hear anything about the Armenians that are dying at a rapid, incredibly rapid pace? Why don't we talk about Arabs for just a second? How is it that some Arabs can get away with killing other ones and there's no discussion about any of this? But yet, if there's even a hint that Israel wants to defend itself because of the brutal attacks made upon its own nation, then all of a sudden Israel is desiring to destroy the lives of Arabs. Folks, do you understand that under Sharia law, women cannot go to school? Do you understand that they are, in essence, producing illiterate women? Because their job in the Islamic mindset is to stay at home and to care for the children, which, by the way, don't get me wrong, I think the most admirable job that any woman can have is to stay at home and to care for her children. Because what they bring to the table is remarkable and brilliant. So when we stop for a second and examine what Islam is bringing to the table for women, it's all about the oppression of women. There is nothing that it brings to the table of any great value for women. And Islam is destructive. I want people to understand it, and I want people to know it for what it is. Folks, make no mistake about it. When we look at the problem of Iran and when we look at the problem of many of these Arab nations, I need you to understand something very clearly. We'll speak about Iran specifically. The leaders of Iran are not doing what they're doing because they have some ideological philosophy that drives their actions with the hope that they can make a better life for the people that they are supposedly helping or leading or ministering to. Everything that they do is being ideologically driven by a text that is designed to deceive mankind. We saw exactly what the butcher of Tehran did in front of the United Nations. I should show you exactly what he did. If you look at his address to the United Nations as he's standing there, Ibrahim Raisi, he stands making an address to the United Nations, and in that address, as he's speaking to them, he holds up the Quran and he begins to tell people about the tool that it stands for, what it means. Do not be deceived by this man's mild appearance. Do not be deceived by his quiet disposition or the lying translator that is speaking words that are smoothing over the things that he is saying in Farsi. Understand, this man is a murderer. He is a liar, and he does it bi-isma Allah. He does it in the name of Allah. Make no mistake about it, he is doing exactly what the Quran tells him to do. And he uses Western terms that he does not apologize for using. He has no problem with the Western terminology that he continues to offer. Do you understand, you guys, that the type of things that he is talking about, he introduces a term, cultural apartheid. Those are Western terms that he's using. He's taking advantage of the ignorance in academia and the lies that continue to be spoken in order to affect a cause that further propagates the ignorance and the death culture that follows Iran. Listen to what Raisi says here.
These understandings that bring unity and divine teachings that inspire, that build human characters, that build societies, that build progress for human societies.
Notice he's holding the Quran in his hand. The same document that directs him to eliminate Jewish lives. The same document that continues to help him to propagate the lie that he is obligated by Allah, which he is obligated by Allah. Allah says it, to eliminate anybody who opposes Islam. It builds societies. It encourages character. Like October 7th. You understand, what we saw on October 7th was a direct result of this man's hand. People need to understand that. He gives this address. This is over a month before October 7th. They had been planning this with Hamas for 2 years. Understand, the Quran that he holds in his hand is the very tool that motivates him to the action of the elimination of not just the Jewish state, but of Jews. And they continue to chant, "Death to America." Continue. Listen to what he continues to say as he's holding up a Quran in his hand.
Will never be burned, is eternal. They remain impervious. The fires of disrespect will not overcome the truth, the divine truth.
The fires of disrespect will not overcome the truth, the divine truth, while he's kissing the Quran and putting it down. Do you believe that, folks? Listen to what he continues to say. I'll only give him another minute or two. Not even that. But listen to what he says.
Mr. President, Islamophobia and cultural apartheid witnessed in Western countries, evident in actions ranging from the desecration of the Holy Quran to the ban on hijab in schools.
Did you say what he's calling cultural apartheid? What he's calling Islamophobia? By not allowing women to cover their faces with the hijab in a public school, that this is the ultimate fire of disrespect, how they speak against the Quran? The reality of it is, when I speak about the Quran, I'm simply quoting what the Quran says, knowing full well that even in the Quran, it makes it very clear that Allah is the chief of liars. He's the chief of deceivers. That's what it says in the Quran. This is not a lie. I have lost count how many times I have read this to you. I've lost count how many times I've sat down to read these exact words. He's mentioning the Quran. He's talking about how holy it is. Let me read exactly from the Quran what it says. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ Khayru al-Makarina. The Quran is saying they deceived, referring to the Jews indirectly. So Allah deceived because Allah is the chief of deceivers. He says we're desecrating the holy book, but all I'm doing is simply quoting what he says is the holy book. Which, if you even look at the credibility of the document itself from a perspective of any level of textual criticism, you will recognize how broken the Quran actually is and how inconsistent it is. They talk about the fact that the Quran cannot be modified or moved. It's the word of Allah that can't be changed. Yet there are 700 versions of the Quran, many of which contradict one another. Because of the absence of grammatical structures that oftentimes insinuate a specific context, not just for a matter of pronunciation for literary flow, it actually changes the context of meanings of specific words. And what do they do to fix the problem? They say, well, I'm going to pick this, this, and this, and this, with no understanding of the variations, no understanding of the inconsistencies, yet it is the holy word that cannot be moved or affected. You understand, the man is standing before the whole world lying, using Western terminology, the terminology that is being taught to our children in the school system, to continue to lie and not tell the truth. The devil is good at what he does. Ladies and gentlemen, the devil is a liar. And he is very good at his deception. Let me go back and play so that you have it in context. What he says is cultural apartheid. Okay?
Will not overcome the truth, the divine truth. Mr. President, Islamophobia and cultural apartheid witnessed in Western countries, evident in actions ranging from the desecration of the Holy Quran to the ban on hijab in schools and numerous other deplorable discriminations, are not worthy of human dignity.
Not worthy of human dignity is his way of saying that they need to be eliminated in ways that are not worthy of humane treatment. And isn't it amazing how he is using the adaptation of Western terminology that comes from the very place that he condemns and hates? So for the sake of communicating his lies, he is willing to introduce terminology to you, allowing it to come out of his mouth that has been propagated by the very people that he hates. Isn't it funny when you think about the lies that continue to be propagated in a way? This is crazy. And if you were to stop for a moment to consider where all of this came from and how this was all put together, you will realize that the Quran in and of itself is not a reliable document. It is a document filled with deception, based on the premise of deception, built on the whole bed of deception. I'm going to play another video for you. You can make what you want of the video, but listen to what this person says regarding Islam. Listen to what he says about what's happening in Europe right now. And tell me what the viability is of Islam being the primary motivator for the destruction of everything that is Western. I want you to take what I'm saying seriously. Folks, when people say they want to destroy your life, you should probably believe them. When people say they want to harm you, you should probably believe them. I think it's important that you believe them because they're not lying. Take a listen to this clip. This will blow your mind. Here we go.
And how's the campaign to move Britain over to Sharia law coming along?
Well, this is in the hands of God. We do our best to propagate Islam. Well, of course it is. I think many people will see that democracy and freedom is no good for the British, no good.
By the way, we're putting this in the hands of Allah. That's really what he's saying. He's saying God, but that's his English version of his lie. He's putting it in the hands of Allah for the consummation of Sharia law in Britain. By the way, and he says that freedom is bad. Freedom is bad in the UK. It's destructive in the UK. Let me rewind it so you can hear it.
And how's the campaign to move Britain over to Sharia law coming along?
Well, this is in the hands of God. We do our best to propagate Islam. Well, of course it is. I think many people will see that democracy and freedom is no good for the British, no good for Afghanistan, and in fact, we need an alternative. Unlike man-made law, the Sharia is not something which gives you a right today to take it away tomorrow. It's good in all times and places.
Siri, to make this an issue of freedom and democracy is absurd. Anjem, you haven't had a hair on your body touched by this government or this country. You haven't spent a day in prison. You haven't suffered one bit for your views. You're allowed to sit here right now because of freedom and democracy. In your so-called caliphate, you'd have me killed, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have me... Am I an apostate that deserves death?
Listen to his answer, okay? I'm going to go back and I'm going to repeat the question that he asks. Listen to how he answers this. This is amazing. If you guys can't believe this, I don't know what to say.
Under your caliphate, he would be executable, would he?
He will be judged by an Islamic judge, and then after that...
He'll be judged by an Islamic judge, and then after that... Folks, you understand? Do you understand the problem here? Do you understand the picture? For every video that I'm showing you, I have a lot more that I can bring to the table that effectively demonstrate this point. I'm trying to make it clear that if we do not understand this for what it is, we're in trouble. Folks, look, it's no secret. Okay, the United States of America is already in deep poo-poo. This is not something that we have to beat around the bush over. The United States of America is already in massive trouble. So let's not pretend as though something is not really happening. It is what it is, and we're in big trouble. Let's not fake. Let's not pretend. This is the reality. This is what Islam is about. And until we recognize the problem for what it is, we're not going to really understand the full implications of everything that are happening. Now, with all that said, understanding that Iran is a major problem, understanding that I think the desires of Satan are being effectively rendered through Iran, especially on the Jews, right? I want you to know this. If we do not take a stand for truth and righteousness now, any even remote hope that you have for change or revival isn't going to happen. It starts by telling the truth. You tell people the truth, and then you trust that God will show up as the truth is being communicated. I want you to be able to understand fully the implications of all that we're watching in the moment. I want you guys to sit as individuals who are fully aware of everything that's happening in front of you. This is serious stuff, you guys. We're not playing games here. We're not just messing around and slouching around. This is all about life and death.